everybody, welcome back to Catherine Sews. Thanks so much for joining me today. My husband and I just bought a new Tesla 3 and we absolutely love it. We also love our dog, but that dog is not getting into that car until I do some serious sewing. Now you can buy a dog seat cover on Amazon, but I've got this old dog seat cover from my old car and I'm going to use what I have and use the skills that I have to make one, because you know what? This channel is called Catherine Sews, not Catherine buys stuff off Amazon. I'm going to see if I can make one, so why don't you come along with me for the ride? We'll see what we can do.
So here you can see the pet blanket that I already have. I think it was meant for covering a couch. It's got these kind of arms that would go over the arms of your couch. So this is actually going to be pretty handy. I also bought this heavy mesh because on the Tesla, the air conditioning comes out between the seats for the back seat. And so I need that mesh so the dog can get fresh air. It's sold by the foot, so I bought 3 feet of that. And then this is what I think I'm gonna need. I'll put a note here though if I use less, but 4 of these buckles, these sort of clipping buckles, 4 zippers that are 25 inches long. Probably I'm gonna use 8 of these sliders, and I'm not sure yet if I'm going to use those D-rings or not, but got 4 of them just in case. I've got 1 of these massive metal clips, like on a dog leash. I'm going to see if I can find a black plastic one instead, because this is heavier duty than we need. This is polypropylene webbing. It's 1 inch wide or 2.5 centimeters wide. I think I'm going to end up using about 2 meters or 2 yards of the webbing. But again, I'll put that in the note. And matches or a lighter to be able to melt the ends of this. Matching thread, sewing machine, that's it. So I'm actually going to take this back out to the car and kind of drape it inside out in the back seat, and we'll see how that goes. Now, doing this inside out is a trick I learned when recovering chairs. You kind of drape fabric over inside out, pin away what you don't need, sew it, and then flip it, and it's perfect. So I think doing this inside out is going to help me here. These foamy flaps are meant for tucking into between the cushions of a couch, but they can tuck right in there into the seat too. Sewing those 2 ends together, that'll work out fine. This will cover the door, and I think it's good. With it inside out, I'm going to take a Sharpie and start making some markings on it where the headrests are and where the ends are going to be. This line I've drawn across the top here, that goes right over, and then here, I'm pinning it to itself, making kind of little hats around the headrest. I had originally thought it would end here and just have a strap just like the one on Amazon. So I'm gonna, I think, be able to sew a little cap that goes right over the headrest. There's like a baby car seat hook here. I'll be able to attach a strap to here and clip it right in there. Yay, that's gonna be good. So I'm gonna take this back to my sewing machine and I'm gonna sew just kind of a basting stitch around these little caps. This is gonna work. Okay, there's the first curve, and then hopping around the fold to the second curve. 4 curves are done, so I'm gonna take it back out to the garage and try it on again. That's pretty good. The caps seem to fit well, like the space in between them is good. I think I should have sewn down a little bit further though. It's kind of sitting up tall. There. Okay, back at the machine. That first one was done with just a basting stitch. This time I'm going to use a regular straight stitch, normal stitch length, about 2.5 millimeters. I'm going to cut in between the 2 caps. About a centimeter away from my from my sewing line. Well, pretty close to the end there. Same thing on the other side. Tame up these edges nicely. I will end up cutting this straight, and I'll put a little bit of a hem on this. I'll just draw a straight line right from the straight line there to where it meets at the curve, and then cut right there. To do a neat little hem here, I do need to clip right to my last stitch there. And then I can turn a hem here. If you get stuck on a bump like that, just put your needle up, give it a little shove forward, and it'll go. So I'm just tucking in that raw edge, just turning that twice, and then sewing close to this inside of the fold. Now I'm going to have to taper this hem to come there. I won't be able to get that double fold all the way down. So I'm just going to taper it in like that. On this side, I'm going to start at that taper. You always want the edge on your right when you're sewing, especially something giant like this. For my zipper, right, I'll have the zipper in behind that edge like this. So I'm just going to be sewing beside. But when I get to that bottom corner, I'm going to keep going because my corner where it's going to fold in the car is way over here. At the top of the zipper, I'm going to just fold in that little extension, tuck that right underneath the edge here, and I'll just put a few pins. And then here's where I still want to be right at the edge at that corner, but then continue past. I've drawn my black line there. That's where I want this zipper to meet. So now I'm going to pin on this side. But again, see that little extension? Let's tuck that in. I'm not feeling the need at all for a zipper foot. If you find that you're slipping off, then yeah, sure, switch to a zipper foot, but it's not bothering me. Oh, that's going to be good, right? This mesh that I bought at the hardware store, it was 36 inches wide on the bolt, and I bought 3 feet of it, so it was a square of 36 by 36. So I just cut it in half, and I'm going to sew these two pieces together flat, but then I'm going to sew the seam down. I'm just going to sew at the 15 line or the 5/8 line, and I'm just using a regular needle. It's not difficult to sew this mesh. So I can't press this seam flat, so instead I'm going to try to sew it flat. I'm going to roll it up from one end to get the seam right along the edge of my presser foot and top stitch that seam allowance down. So I'm sewing through the 3 layers. Good, so that holds that seam nice and flat now. One thing I always liked about this old blanket was that it's washable. So if I sew that mesh directly to it, I'm not going to be able to throw it in the washing machine anymore. So I have to attach it in a way that's removable. I thought about a long zipper, like a duvet zipper, but it has to be a separating zipper. So I'm going to actually put button and buttonholes. I'm just going to put a row of buttonholes on the blanket and then attach buttons to the mesh, and I think that's going to work. So on one of the long edges of the mesh, I'm going to turn it so that I can, have something solid to anchor buttons to. I'm just wondering if I would be smart to actually sew in some kind of like black ribbon or something like that to just give a more solid place to sew a button. I think this will be the perfect thing. It's a twill tape, and it's about maybe ½ an inch wide, and I'm going to sew that in. Yeah. Okay, first I'm going to sew it to the edge, then I'll turn up that edge and sew it about 1 inch full, and that's where I'll sew the buttons on. So that'll be nice and strong. I'm just going to sew that on. I use a big wide zigzag stitch. A zigzag stitch that's 3.5 millimeters by 3 millimeters. Now I'll turn up 1 inch, and I'm going to zigzag that down again. I should be able to just follow the mesh and keep that same inch fold the whole way. So I'll give you measurements. I'm cutting it now, so 31 1/4, but this is in half, so it's 62.5 inches or about 160 centimeters. I've already put that 1 inch hem along the top, and I know I want a 1 inch hem along the bottom. I'm going to cut it at 10 inches or 25 centimeters deep. And this is really handy stuff. You can make pockets for tote bags. Don't throw out your scraps. Now I'm going to turn under 1 inch on the remaining 3 sides and sew that down. I've sewn that little short edge, and I'm going to do the other long edge and then the other short edge. I'm using that same zigzag stitch again because I like how it's holding the edge of the mesh together. And then this last little short edge. And before I sew buttonholes along the front of this, I want to sew that down just so I have a more sturdy place to sew the buttonholes. So now I'm turning under 1 1/4 on this side, 1 1/4 or 3 centimeters, and I'm just going to sew that down with a regular straight stitch. So I've got them centered here, and if I just keep that together, that's just an easier way to find the length that I need. This will be where my first and last buttonhole need to go. And I'm going to use 9 buttons, and I always like to use an odd number of buttons because it just makes it so much easier to space them out. One will start here, one will start there, and then one in the middle. Good. If this is the middle and this is the end, I'm going to bring those two together. One will go in between there. And bring those two together. One will go in between there. And then here to there. So I am just taking 1/2 of the blanket, and just by folding, I have it easily divided into 5, the 5th being the middle one. And then I'll do the same on the other side. And by doing that, that gives me my 9. This is a Babylock Sofia 2. It does really nice buttonholes. This is the buttonhole foot. I'm going to take about 9 buttons. I'm going to put it in the back of that buttonhole foot. That's how it measures how big to make the buttonhole. And this goes in the back to there. This little lever comes all the way down, and it has to sit behind this. You see that? Well, it even has a little picture of a buttonhole there. So I just want the regular plain buttonhole. This machine is going to start doing the buttonhole and then go backwards. I'm centering this presser foot now on my little placket that I've sewn. It comes to a complete stop when it's done. So now I just lift up and scoot right to my next one. Center, take out your pin, and go. And then the last step for buttonholes is trim off your threads, and then taking small scissors, wiggle the tip in. Don't push, just wiggle it in, and then snip your way across. And can you see why I say don't push? Because I've had students just push right through and cut the whole buttonhole open. The mesh is going to come in here. The zipper's going to be there. Problem is, I need to have a piece of fabric that buttons to the mesh but sews to the zipper on this side. I have to continue this up with buttons, and that'll work. I just need to make like an L shape here. So I have extra fabric here that I'm about to cut off, and I'm going to do this on both sides. If I just sew an inch fold there, that'll give me the strip that I need that can still sew to the zipper on that edge. You could even just sew that down with a zigzag stitch. I think I'm just going to serge that edge. I'm going to turn under 3 centimeters or 1.25 inches and sew that down. So that's how it's going to end up being. This is going to button to this. That buttonhole is redundant, so I have to do another one over here. So I'm going to sew 1 button there, and then 1 would be about here, and 1 closer to the top about there. That'll be fine. And then I'll sew it to this. Okay, 4 more buttonholes. Here we go. This extra little piece is going to button to the mesh right here. This piece is going to come around. I want to sew that onto this one. That's where I need to sew, and then the zipper is going to come right down this edge. And I think I'm going to try to sew a nice little rectangle there. It's time to sew on all those buttons. We have 9 across here, 2 on each side, so that's 13 buttons altogether. I have a collection of 13 different black buttons, all the same size, but a bit mismatched. And I've got the blanket part with these little extra extensions. Got it pinned all the way around the whole length, all the way down. Let me show you how I sew on buttons, because I think my way is really nice and fast. The way I sew buttons uses a quadruple thread. So I use needles that have a nice big eye. This is a size 5 or 6 embroidery needle. I'm taking that arm's length and doubling it, and then I'm going to take that doubled and quadruple it. so that I end up with a thread that is 4 arms lengths. The 2 cut-ins together go in the needle, and that's why you want a needle with a big eye like that. It makes it nice and easy to thread your needle. Bring it down nice and even. I kind of twist them together and then wrap around my finger, and you can put it through once and through twice. Push that whole mess down, you get a nice big fat knot, and then cut off the extra thread that comes after your knot. Slide my needle in through that buttonhole, and I want my button to sit about in the middle of that buttonhole. So I've got my needle placed. I can take out that first pin, and that's where I want my button to sit. I'm going to start with my first button, and we go up the back of the button, down the front of the button, and in through the same stitch. Now you'll notice that my knot is on the outside. Button is going to hide the knot. Because my fabric is thick and it's going to have to sit under this button, I need to create a space for it. So before I pull that first thread tight, I'm sticking a toothpick underneath there, and then we go up the back of the button again, down the front of the button, and in through the exact same stitch again, in and out. So that's 8 threads now holding that button on. This third stitch will make it 12 threads holding that button. Good. So 12 threads is nice and strong. I can slide out the toothpick, and then I'm going to wrap my thread around tight about 6 or 7 times, and that transfers the space that we created to underneath the button. To tie the knot, I'm going to go sideways through all of that underneath the button here. And as I draw my needle through, that loop forms. And don't let it get tangly. Put your needle back through that loop. Pull that tight. Do that a second time. Sideways through that thread shank. And then pull tight through the loop. And just before I cut my thread, I'll put it through one more time. Good. And snip. Good, there's our first button. So I like to do up that button so that keeps me in line for the next. So that's going to be good. One more thing that's bothering me is that these side flaps between where the zippers are going to be, when you open the car door, that's what you're going to see. And that's going to look kind of terrible. So I've got some black lining that I'm going to sew to the back of this blanket, and so I've just torn it into 2 squares that are just a couple inches bigger than these. What I've done here is I've just pinned this lining piece all the way around. This is the last thing we're going to sew before I call it a day. I've got it extended down to where the bottom of the zipper line is. I also have that line of where I drew for the zipper. I transferred that line onto the lining as well. So I'm going to just sew around both these side flaps, and then I'm going to relax in front of Netflix and sew on buttons. Don't let the lining get too close to the teeth of the zipper because you don't want it to get stuck in there. So I've got it set back a bit from the edge. I did put that lining on the side flap so that when you open the car door it looks a bit better. So I'm going to be running the zipper down here now. This time though I want the zipper to face the outside so that when I open the car door I can just unzip those 2 front zippers. I'm going to sew the zipper right side down to this side and up against that side. I think that's as good as it's going to get. This is the setup for the zipper at the front corner. I'm going to be sewing the zipper just down like that, leaving this little end free because it's going to have to end up poking out like that. So I'm just going to come down there and do the part below this and then do that. And up the other side of the zipper, leaving the bottom end free. Good. So now the zipper can be accessed on the outside. To melt the ends of your polypropylene webbing, easiest way, I think, is a lighter or a candle. Take your end and just run it through the candle a couple times. You can have a bowl of water nearby just in case, but honestly it doesn't like catch on fire, it just melts. For the clip on the back, I did find a black plastic hook and just put that through, and so there. This strip is just about 6 inches. Now for the side panels, to make it adjustable for the side panels, I'm going to put it up and down through a slider, then through a D-ring, okay, like that. On the back now, take this in and go back through that slider. It makes it easier if you kind of loosen it up off that slider a little bit. Take that and go back through, and then pull them both out. This little end now, pull a little bit more so you can grab that tail and the piece that it's coming from, and then you can adjust that. So this little tail has to sew to itself, not to down here. It won't be adjustable if you sew it down here. It has to go back up onto itself so you can move it. So I'll sew that. And then I'm going to have 2 pieces coming off of this to support the side panel. I need to create space just to be able to get in to sew that, and I want to do a nice strong back tack in there. I'm just going to sew around this triangular shape. Can you see I just did that in a square with an X, so that's nice and solid. And I'm just going to pin it to the blanket and try it on one more time before I sew that down. So I just took it back out to the garage one last time. So this whole side contraption totally works. That's going to be great. So I've put together the second one just like it. I'll attach both. I've had to just adjust in the car a tiny bit as to where these go. But now I'm going to sew those down in kind of square shapes around the bottom of the straps. So that's all good. Here are the 2 caps that go over the headrest at the back. And then in between those, that little extra flap, I just sewed the hook. So that's fine. That worked out really nicely. I placed this extra strap tucked in from the left side of one cap all the way through the middle to the right side of the other cap. It gets tucked in there, and honestly that wouldn't have to be adjustable. You can just measure exactly what you need. It doesn't necessarily have to be adjustable or open. It just can hook over, and that would be fine too. The mesh insert is just fine, and I thought that I was gonna have to make these adjustable. These are the loops that go over the front headrests, but it doesn't have to be adjustable at all. In fact, it's much easier to just pop this over the headrest. I didn't want to just sew it to the top of the mesh. That didn't seem like it would be strong enough. So I'm going to be sewing it right down through the mesh to the bottom. Okay, so this is what we ended up with. It's the same configuration as the blanket was with these side flaps, but you can see what I added here. There's that strap with the 2 joins on it. And then all 4 corners around these side panels have the zipper added on. This is the mesh that goes toward the front of the car. These loops just hook right over the 2 front headrests. And then at the back, it's got the 2 caps that flap in between with that hook. And then the strap that goes from one cap to the other, just to keep these little corners kind of in place. So that is it. It's all done. That was quite a marathon, but it's all done. Let me show you how it goes in. First, that big long strap goes over the 2 caps. The 2 caps pop on. So the 2 caps pop on. Then this little hook goes on the baby seat. Flip. Back zipper. Front zipper. This little D-ring goes up here. D-ring up there. That loop just pops right over the front headrest. Okay, so to let the dog in, all we do is take off that D-ring. And I think even just unzipping the front zipper would be enough. Let's see if he likes it. Here we go. Up. Good boy. Okay. Yeah, he likes it. Oh, there's a good boy. There's a good boy. Who gets to ride in the Tesla? Timo does. Good boy.